Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. As we have, whenever the Steelers have played the Browns the last couple seasons, including last week, it is my pleasure to welcome back a friend of the show, John Goehring, to talk about the Browns as we look ahead to the Steelers and Browns Super Wild Card Weekend Sunday night game. So, John, welcome back to the show. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Get to be on your show twice in a row, 2 weeks in a row. That's really exciting stuff. And my Browns are in the playoffs for the first time since I was 4. So I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing, John?
Oh, it's fantastic. Like I said, if that matchup were to occur, as I said last week, it would really be just spoiling us. And obviously you are doing so, and we very much appreciate it. The Browns, back in the playoffs since 2002. I think I was 6 years old at the time. It was one of my earliest football memories, that game between Pittsburgh and Cleveland 18 years ago. And it was really one for the ages, although unfortunately for your Browns, they came out on the wrong side of it and thus endured a very long stretch of frustrating football. But the turnaround from just 2017, now just 3 seasons ago, where the team went 0-16, some up and down since then, but this year an 11-win team finally back in the playoffs. You want to talk just briefly about what it means to have your team back in the playoffs for the first time in so long, playing such a meaningful game this late in the year?
Well, yeah, that's the first thing, is playing meaningful games in December. That hasn't even happened in a decade. So that this season has been really, really exciting, despite all these circumstances that are making things difficult. But it gives every terrible team a hope that doesn't take all that long, as long as you might think, to turn around an NFL team. Just takes one or two of the right pieces, and then the dominoes start to fall from there. And for the Browns, that's been the right quarterback in Baker Mayfield. Despite his ups and downs, he's still leading this team to a postseason appearance. The right head coach in Kevin Stefanski, and just the other pieces that you need, like this strong O-line and D-line. And it doesn't take that long to turn a team around, and here we are in the postseason, and all of a sudden the future beyond 2021 is also looking bright as well. So really exciting to be back.
Yeah, so why don't we talk about how it happened, first of all. Obviously, the two teams played last week, and I think it ended up being a little bit closer than we thought. It was assumed kind of that the Browns were going to be able to win, maybe not by a ton, but were able to be in control for most of the game, which they actually were. They were the better team most of the game, held a 24-9 lead, but the Steelers made a bit of a comeback late in the game and nearly had a chance to tie it before a 2-point conversion was denied by the Browns defense. And the Browns had to hang on, but as they say, a win is a win. What do you think about the Browns' performance last game? Do you think it was a little jittery? Do you think it was just, I don't even know, like how can you attribute it? Because you saw some really good things from Cleveland, but obviously I think it goes without saying you want to see them perform a little bit better in crunch time, considering who the Steelers were not playing in that game.
Yeah, it was extremely clunky, and especially that second half, of course, after taking that 24-9 lead. I don't want to say they let off the gas, because obviously they weren't thinking that way. This is the one game into the postseason, but they just got away from who they are, and that in play calling, being a little bit too aggressive with the play calls instead of just continuing to bleed the clock and run the ball, which was fairly successful. I know Chubb only had I don't have the exact number here, but he had only, I think, a few more than 20 carries, and Kareem Hunt wasn't really involved whatsoever, and Mayfield was dropping back and throwing too many passes. And then on defense, some key penalties and just overall sloppiness and a lack of a pass rush later on just allowed the Steelers to get back in that game. And boy, for every Browns fan, that was a frightening experience, and certainly a huge relief to break up that pass on the two-point conversion attempt and finally recover the onside kick, too, because it seemed like even that was a challenge, and come away with that victory. It was hard-fought. It was ugly and awkward and bizarre, but somehow the Browns were able to get it done, and I think that's all that matters. I don't think they're really taking some of those negatives into this week. I think it's kind of just a clean slate, which is an encouraging thing.
That is what the playoffs is all about, John, entering with a clean slate. Nothing that you did in the regular season matters. But that being said, as we turn our attention to the third matchup between these two teams, something that does not happen very often. In fact, the two teams' history meeting in the playoffs, this is only the third time that it's happened. Obviously, it happened 18 years ago in that memorable wild card game in 2003 of January. And then there was one additional matchup in the postseason for the 1994 season, back when Bill Belichick was the head coach of the Browns, going way back. So when you play a team for a third time, obviously there's a lot of familiarity between divisional opponents. There isn't really an intimidation factor because the teams are so familiar with each other. But what do you think can be taken away from the previous two matchups as you go looking into a third between the Steelers and Browns, where it's like, okay, maybe the Steelers do this thing well? What have you seen from the two games so far that gives you kind of thoughts on what you might see from the Browns, either differently or the same this time around?
Well, after that first matchup, and the Steelers just dominated that game, I knew I wasn't able to even tune in until the second quarter, and by that point it was getting out of hand already. But this past matchup, I don't want to say it's a throwaway. There is some things that we can take away, like I think especially in the play calling, we have to stick to who this team is fundamentally on offense. But at the same time, you can't hold too much weight on this past game without so many of Pittsburgh's starters in the game. But I think just these two previous games can really tell both teams a lot. And each team, of course, has won one. And just as far as their playing styles and Pittsburgh's dominant defense and just aggressive defense, which I'm sure you can speak to, they were able to get a strong pass rush on Mayfield, stop the run in that first game, really stymie that Browns offense that was on such a roll coming into that first Pittsburgh-Cleveland matchup. And I think the Browns just have to be prepared for that and just have to have a game plan to overcome that. But besides that, I think being the third matchup, I mean, I know that definitely is a big deal, and that doesn't happen hardly ever, as you noted. I do think, though, that this is a very different matchup than it was last week for obvious reasons, with the Steelers starters being back, and that's going to make it sort of a new matchup with a much different game plan, more resembling the adjustments that this team needs to make from that first Pittsburgh loss, which was really ugly.
So yeah, let's obviously talk about some of the developments that's going on. It would not be a successful Browns season making it to the playoffs finally if there weren't more roadblocks. It seems like such a Browns thing, John, that COVID-19 has infected the team, and we knew that there were a couple players like Denzel Ward that were not able to play last week, but this week it's infected the head coach Kevin Stefanski and left guard Joel Bitonio, who, I mean, you can tell me, as far as I know that Wyatt Teller's been the highest grade PFF offensive lineman, but Bitonio has been the staple on that offensive line since Joe Thomas retired. He's been the guy since then, and he's one of the best guards in the league. And having him out is going to be tough, and obviously having your head coach not being able to call plays, which I was kind of surprised that there wasn't anything in place where he might be able to call plays remotely. I thought that was something they were doing in college, but I digress. You want to talk to me a little bit about what the loss of both of those guys means for this team?
It's huge on that offensive line. Yeah, I mean, without Bitonio, you and I were talking before the show, and you hinted at Michael Dunn, who's, not even played the offensive snap and offensive snap yet this season, and that's what we're looking at now in a postseason game. It's going to be difficult to replace the effectiveness there of Bitonio, and not only in the rushing attack, but pass protecting too. The Steelers, these pass rushers, my goodness, and obviously they have one of the best pass rushes in the league, and that leads to so many turnovers and just horrible situations for opposing offenses. And so I worry about how much time Mayfield is going to have in the backfield tomorrow night because of this injury on the offensive line. That's going to hurt. Stefanski being out is definitely a factor, too. I mean, the special teams coordinator now takes over, and that's just bizarre. I think it would be an easier roadblock to overcome if this were during the regular season, when maybe these teams weren't playing for the first playoff game in 18 years. But it still is something that I think the Browns can overcome if their other assistant coaches can get on the same page and kind of work this game as a committee. I think that's a very important thing. And if they could just stay true to who they are on both sides of the ball, they will be able to overcome that aspect of it. But it's going to be very, very difficult with all of those COVID list injuries. I believe there's 8 of them right now, and we don't know if maybe one or two of them can return. But yeah, the Browns are decimated on the O-line and in the secondary, and those are 2 very vulnerable areas that Pittsburgh can attack, and that's a huge concern.
So I wanted to stick with Stefanski not being able to coach this game. He's still going to be able to put together a game plan, and I kind of think therein lies the key for both of these teams, and that's starting fast. Obviously, Pittsburgh has had struggles on offense lately this year, and with the strength of their team being their defense, they want to be that aggressive team that you were talking about, attacking opposing offenses from a strong position of having a lead to defend. Meanwhile, the Browns being that classic power running team that we've seen this year, one of the best along with the Ravens and Titans in the way that they run the ball down the field. You've got a strong play-action game with Baker Mayfield. I would imagine that starting strong is probably the number one key for this game above anything else, just because of the way both offenses have played, A, this year, and B, as of late, depending on the team we're talking about.
Yeah, for that reason, and also just because that's always the Browns' game plan. I mean, starting fast on offense, especially in the ground game, to set up that play-action pass. Now that the Browns have some wide receivers at their disposal, last week that was kind of nice. It was like, oh, wow, wide receivers. That's the foreign concept after that loss to the Jets there where they were missing their top 4 receivers. But with that option now, and against a strong Pittsburgh secondary, yes, but I think the Browns can still set up a lot of play-action plays if they have success on the ground early on in this game. And then, for Pittsburgh, defensively for the Browns against Pittsburgh's offense, if they get off to a really strong start offensively, then you force the Browns into their more aggressive offense and more pass-heavy offense, and that's never a good thing because Pittsburgh's pass rush is so strong. So I think overall, just as these matchups play out, and Pittsburgh's defense being so incredibly strong, combined with Cleveland's offensive line now being totally, really decimated without, Conklin and Bitonio, it's going to be really a tough go here for the team if they start slow. But I guess the same goes for Pittsburgh, knowing that their offense has had its struggle too, right? I mean, especially on the ground, they need to get off to a fast start to get rid of those suspicions that maybe they're in for another one of these very low output affairs on offense.
Indeed. I'll get to that in a little bit, but let's stick with the Browns offense right now. You talked a little bit about that banged-up offensive line. We touched on Joel Bitonio not being able to play, but every single starter on this team, as far as the offensive line goes, is on the injury report, excluding Bitonio, who's already on the COVID list. Jack Conklin has had a knee issue, so he's questionable. J.C. Tretter's got a knee issue. He's questionable. Wyatt Teller's got an ankle. He's questionable, too. And actually, I take that back. Only Jedrick Wills is not on there. So that's 3 of the 5 guys on the injury report and an additional on COVID. I would think that from what I'm seeing as far as the participation goes, they should be able to play. The only one I'd have a concern about is Conklin because he didn't practice on Friday. Even though they're not at full strength, obviously having them would be key. But I was thinking that one thing that might help is the fact that the Browns went with heavy personnel a lot in this past game, and they're getting their third tight end back, Harrison Bryant. And I think I love the Browns tight ends, John, to be quite honest with you. Hooper's been a guy I've liked for a long time, and I think Bryant's played really well, and Njoku's kind of a wild card too. Could you talk about maybe how they might be utilized in the sense that they could probably help this running game by being on the field a little more in the matchups that they create?
Sure, and it's really great that Brian's going to be back. I mean, coming off of the COVID list, you wonder how effective he's going to be, and you wonder how, how many snaps that he's going to get and what his role is going to be. But regardless, having that third tight end is huge, and what it allows the Browns to do is play a lot of these two tight end sets, and that's really effective for this team, especially early on in games with the rushing attack, is when they put two tight ends, they bookend the offensive line with tight ends, whether it be Hooper and Njoku or Bryant. One is on each side, and then they do what I believe is 12 personnel a lot, and the one back and the two out wide. And then what you see is just a ground and pound run game, and it's been really effective for the Browns to just hand the ball to Chubb over and over again and let those tight ends continue to create holes. Now, Pittsburgh's defense is a different animal than a lot of these defenses that they've run ball effectively against this season. But with those tight ends, it aids that beat-up offensive line that, like you mentioned, I don't know if Conklin's going to be able to go. In fact, I think he's truly questionable, and I don't know. If I were a betting person, I might even bet against him, considering the experience of Kendall Lamb and combined with the fact that he hasn't practiced. I just think that that's not looking good for Conklin. But yeah, the rest of that offensive line, even when they are able to go, Treaders should be able to go, but he's beat up. And that's going to really be difficult for a very physical type of game plan that the Browns want to establish here. But like you said, I think having those tight ends is a huge key for that run blocking and also pass catching. I mean, honestly, the red zone targets, those are very, very important. You got to score in the red zone, and that's what the Browns have in Austin Hooper and David Njoku as well.
So let's keep talking about those weapons. Obviously, how do you say his first name? Hodge? How do you say his name? Do you know?
I'm sorry, Cordell Hodge.
Cordell Hodge, yeah. So we were talking before the podcast about how whenever he plays Pittsburgh, he always ends up with like just 2 catches, but he's got like 50, 60 yards on him. He's going to be out in this game. Yeah. He's a downfield threat, and as we know, Donovan Peoples-Jones is in concussion protocol after that hit he took last weekend. He finished with a limited practice on Friday, and Jarvis Landry was full with the hip, so there's a little bit of question marks regarding the receivers. I know there was an incident with Rashard Higgins, I believe, earlier this week, something about drag racing. I didn't know a ton about that, but he's not on the injury report.
Yeah,
yeah,
right. That was a heck of on Tuesday. Spending your day off that way during COVID, not a great idea.
In any case, as far as I know, he's going to be available, right?
Yeah, he's still going to be available. That's a non-injury incident there, but yes, he should be available. But like you said, the rest of that receiver group is somewhat decimated, and Peoples-Jones not looking too good because you know how concussion protocol is.
Mm-hmm. So obviously Landry is kind of the number one target there, the guy that's reliable in all situations. But with the loss of guys like Hodge and Peoples-Jones, do you think that means we're going to see even more targets to a guy like Jarvis Landry and Rashard Higgins, or do you think that the Browns are going to try to get their running backs, especially Kareem Hunt, and we already talked about the tight ends, more involved? Do you think it's a more receiver, tight end-centric attack, or do you think that we could see more use of the running backs in this game as far as the pass offense goes? So just if you could, John, could you talk to me a little bit about what those losses at receiver could mean for the passing attack, and if it means the running backs could be more featured, or maybe just the receivers that will be there get the ball a little bit more?
I think the game plan stays the same as it normally would, which means that those receivers being out are going to lead to more opportunities for the receivers that are in. But what I will say, and I'm really glad that you brought up the tight end before even talking about the receivers, because honestly, these tight ends might end up with more, or just as many targets as the receivers that are on the this roster right now that are active. But I think that they run the ball the same amount as they normally would, and then they just play with who they have on the exterior, because that's what they've done all year. And you see in the Jets game, the Browns were without their top 4 receivers, right? All the household names, so to speak, were out, and you're throwing to, Johnny Jones or whoever, on the outside there that nobody had ever even heard of. Yet Baker still dropped back 25 times and threw out those many passes. So I think those receivers will still get the same opportunities and even elevated opportunities if Peoples-Jones is in fact out. And of course, Hodge being out, that downfield threat. But I do think that it will open up a lot for the tight ends, which is really a good thing for this Browns team, who needs a physical receiver down the field to make some plays and a big red zone target like an Austin Hooper, a Njoku, and even a Harrison Bryant, too. So I think the passing game will still be a huge part of this game.
Let's go to the other side of the ball for the Browns, a unit that has, like you said, a very good defensive front as far as the defensive line goes. They took a massive loss on Sunday with the loss of Olivier Vernon due to an Achilles tear. He's since had surgery on that. But as far as the Browns go, Vernon being out and now Ronnie Harrison going on the COVID-19 list means that PFF has two of the Browns' top 5 graded defensive players will not play in this playoff game Sunday night. Can you talk to me a little bit first about how good Olivier Vernon has been in his second season with the Browns and what his loss means for a guy like Myles Garrett, who, even though he's played really well this year, it's clear that he's still seemingly feeling the effects of COVID-19 after having gotten over it, because he, as far as I've heard, you can kind of expand on this. I've heard that he's seen a breathing specialist, and I don't think he was out there on like the last drive because he was winded. It's just strange to see.
Very strange, and the virus just affects everybody so differently. It's a bizarre thing, but I mean, don't get us wrong. I think he's still absolutely effective, maybe on a slightly more limited basis. But if they pace him throughout the game, pace his snaps, he won't play every snap. He really won't. I don't think anyway, unless he's had a miraculous turnaround these past few days. But yeah, the respiratory element of it is definitely something that's been an obstacle. But at the same time, I do think that he will be a major factor in this game. As for Vernon, boy, that hurts. Vernon has played so well. He's been the complement to Garrett and Richardson and Ogunjobi up on that front four, which is, I think, one of the most underrated front fours besides Garrett in all of football, because I think everybody thinks, oh, Browns defense, Myles Garrett. But Sheldon Richardson, Ogunjobi, and Olivier Vernon had lights out years. But the good news is Porter Gustin can come in. He's played some quality snaps for this team on that defense. I think Porter Gustin can play a strong game, at least hold down that defensive end position and not let any major breakthroughs or lapses in that running defense happen. He's not as much of a pass rusher, but he can stop the run, and I think they'll be able to fill that hole, but it certainly would be so much better if Vernon could play. I'm not too concerned, but yeah, a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, so you mentioned him and Adrian Claiborne, as far as I can tell, seem to be the two guys off the edge that are backups. Gustin was actually a guy that I looked at coming out of the draft a couple years back. I thought he was pretty solid, and I'm glad to see that he is producing at least well enough right now. Could be a big game for him on Sunday. And you touched on Garrett, so yeah, that front line for the defense, certainly one of the more unheralded groups outside of Garrett. But obviously Vernon was having a really good year. Sheldon Richardson is one of those guys that really, I think people almost forget that he's with the Browns, but he's been the last 2 years really effective. And again, he put up 6 sacks this year from the interior position. That's a pretty solid number. Let's talk a little bit about some of the reinforcements that the Browns are going to possibly get back here. It was noted, understandably, that the Steelers were resting a lot of starters in that first game last week. However, it's also worth noting that Denzel Ward, Malcolm Smith, I believe Andrew Sandejo, on top of others now, including Ronnie Harrison on the COVID list. There's a bunch of different guys there, including Smith and Sendejo, two of the top leading tacklers on the Browns team, that are going to be eligible to come off. We're still not sure, I believe, if they're off yet, and I believe B.J. Goodson was the other. So there's a lot of different names that either are going to come off the list or have the chance to come off. Those could be massive reinforcements for a team that did just lose a guy like Vernon and Ronnie Harrison.
Yeah, Sendejo did just come off. He's no longer on that COVID list, so he should be good to go, obviously. But we still are waiting for the linebacker that you just mentioned, Malcolm Smith. Is that the one that you just mentioned?
Yep, former Super Bowl MVP.
He's still on the. Yeah, he's still on the list. And of course, Denzel Ward is that he's going to be missing as well, and he's had kind of a rough campaign here. But it'll be nice to have those guys back in the secondary. The secondary coming into the season was like the extreme weak point of this team. It was what we all worried about, and drafting Grant Delpit was like one of what was supposed to be this huge reinforcement, that this season has not really gone quite that way. And there are guys back there who are just not NFL starters, and I'm assuming we're going to see a good amount of Sheldrick Redwine again, and we've just seen and good for him for getting in so many snaps and playing, somewhat effectively, but he's just not an NFL starter, and that's a problem when a non-NFL starter plays 10 games in one of your most important positions at safety. But hoping that these guys don't have to make too many tackles against the Steelers' rush game that they really need to shut down up front. And I'm hoping they can just keep that passing game in check. The Steelers will make some big plays on offense through the passing game. I'm confident of, but I think if these guys can avoid some large penalties that give Pittsburgh 3 yards and chunk plays, and I think on third down, if they can really tighten up on in that back end, that's going to be the key. Just trying to do too much, but doing just enough to slow the potent Pittsburgh passing attack down.
So let me ask you, who on the Pittsburgh offense is most concerning to you if you're the Browns' defensive coordinator in this game, and how do you think the Browns are going to try to take that away?
Chase Claypool, I think, is the most concerning. I think Claypool on the outside has become one of the strongest weapons in the league receiving, and he has the combination of size and speed that doesn't bode well for the Browns secondary, who are undersized and, I don't want to say slow, but not the fastest. So I think Claypool as a downfield threat is frightening to me because the Steelers know that they're going to have to make some chunk plays to beat this Browns team. But they can. They definitely can. And the Browns need to keep him in check. Obviously, Smith-Schuster is another guy that can make some great plays, and you worry about him too. He doesn't quite have the size, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems that Claypool is the more daunting figure on the outside. But that passing attack in general does scare me, because I think that if they don't have huge plays, they could get 3 huge plays through penalties out of desperation from that overmatched Browns secondary, and I just have a hard time believing that the Browns will shut them down because they're just so overmatched.
Last thing I wanted to mention, the Juju Smith-Schuster you talked about had a comment which I would like to point out that he was kind of repeating something that Mike Tomlin says a lot. So he was kind of more so quoting him, although the fact of the matter is he was asked about playing the Browns again, and his quote was, this is the one that was pulled, so it needs some context added. However, he did say, I think they're still the same Browns I play every year. I think they're nameless gray faces, which is the Tomlinism, if you will. They have a couple of good players on their team, but at the end of the day, I don't know. The Browns, is what he said. I don't know if you saw that quote. I'm sure the Browns players have, and I'm curious if you think that what he said and the way it's being kind of portrayed makes you think that the Browns are going to be a little more fired up going into this one, or do you think it won't have much of an impact at all?
It definitely is bulletin board material. I mean, when you say anything like that, I understand where he's coming from, to be completely honest with you, because I think the comment, as you said, you got to take some context and realize that it's just a Tomlinism. And yeah, Schuster's got a little bit of an edge to him, and that's what makes him a fun player. I mean, let's be honest. But I don't hear that and go, oh, like, I hate you, Juju Smith-Schuster. I hear it and I go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, I think what he's trying to get across is that their preparation is going to be the same, because these guys are, what's that Tomlinism, nameless, faceless, gray people. I think that's just an approach to the game that Tomlin has taken that's obviously been so effective since the Steelers. This is one of the most dominant, dynasties under the time of Tomlin that we've ever seen in the AFC North. So I think that's more where the comment's coming from. But at the same time, yeah, it's good. It's great bulletin board material for this Browns team that has a little bit of an attitude and amongst themselves. So I think that I guess could be beneficial to the Browns in a small, unmeasurable way, if they apply it the right way, if they use it as a motivating factor. But in the end, it's just talk, and I think it happens almost every week, and I'm just not really too concerned about that. I just hope the Browns taken aback by that too much. But I don't think the comment was meant in the way that it's been taken.
John, that was probably the most reasonable and well thought out response I ever could have thought in regards to something like that. I have probably about 200 people on Twitter that have their own thoughts on it that completely disagree with us, but I'm glad that you said what you said, because I agree. Again, the context is important, but if the Browns do go out there and win, they're going to be talking about it because it is bulletin board material, and that will be something that is remembered about this playoff game if that is what ultimately ends up happening. So that being said, we've kind of overviewed a little bit of everything here. Third time these two teams have played. It's been very happy to have you back on, John. I want you to one final time give me kind of the down low as far as what you think this game sets up to be and how you think it's going to go. The final score prediction and all that good stuff. So if you could do us all a favor and tell us what you think about this one.
Yeah, this one's going to be fun. Honestly, I don't say this to discredit the Steelers at all. I think the Steelers, despite having that rocky end of the regular season with those 3 out of 4 losses there, despite that, they're a Super Bowl contender. I mean, I really think they are. The rushing attack is the most concerning one, but you guys are legitimate Super Bowl contenders because of that defense, because of that quarterback, because of your head coach. That's always going to put you in position. Now, can they beat the Chiefs or whatever? I don't know. We'll see if we even get there. But as far as this game is concerned, boy, obviously I just so want to pick the Cleveland Browns, and I have a lot of faith in what the Browns can do to overcome adversity, and they have all season. They've their way into the playoffs despite almost collapsing after a 15-point lead was nearly blown. So the Browns have a lot going for them and a lot of reason to play their hearts out. They're going to leave everything out there on the field. They have that attitude now. As you said, they have that bulletin board material. They have everything that they need to compete with the Steelers, and that's what I think they will do. I think they will compete very hard with the Steelers. I mean, I think this will be a close game into the fourth quarter. I'm not going to be able to get to sleep until at least 2 a.m. on Sunday night because it's going to be a really intense game. But I think the Steelers just, in the end, unfortunately, if I'm going to look at it objectively, I think the Steelers have the experience, the firepower, and just the overall ability, especially on defense, to come away with this one on top. I'm going to say, if you want this final score prediction, I'm going to say 31-27 in a close back-and-forth affair that ends with a big play by the Steelers with less than 3 minutes to go, and then the Browns aren't able to respond on offense, and that's how the game ends. It's going to be tight, but I'm going to put the Steelers in this one.
That sounds a lot like the way the last playoff game between these two teams ended. So, obviously, I'm expecting it'll be a good one, and I'm looking forward to it. And that being said, John, let me ask you one more additional thing. If the Browns can get past this game and they're going into the next round, it would be a road game, possibly against either the Chiefs or Bills, potentially. I was curious as to what you thought, how far you thought this team might be able to go, as they probably get some reinforcements back, like Kevin Stefanski and Bitonio. Do you think this team has the legs to potentially win multiple playoff games, maybe even go as far as the Super Bowl?
Yes, and I've definitely I've looked at this, obviously, as a Browns fan. You start looking ahead, and we shouldn't, because we have our hands full this week, obviously. But the Browns win. I'm thinking the Buffalo Bills are going to beat Indianapolis. That's just another prediction. We'll see if that's even relevant. But I think that'll make the Browns go to Kansas City if they were to win. And that would definitely be a challenge. But as Kansas City has also had some late season struggles, I think a lot of times the postseason is about getting hot at the right time. I don't really want to say the Browns are hot after last week necessarily, but I think that can also start in the postseason with some wild card weekend momentum. And if they're able to get past Pittsburgh, I think getting those reinforcements are going to make things even easier. And I don't want to say that I would pick the Browns to beat the Chiefs, but I would certainly be intrigued, and I'd like that matchup a little bit more, maybe even than this Pittsburgh matchup, if that were to happen, because it's just all about getting hot at that right time, and the Browns could make some noise in this postseason, which would obviously just, completely, Cleveland would just lose it if that were to be the case. But 1 week at a time, this is certainly a huge challenge for the Browns against a division rival.
John, thank you so much for joining me today and talking Steelers Browns for the third time. I've said it multiple times before, but it's always much appreciated when you get to come on and talk Browns with us. We're always lucky to get to talk to you twice a year, and this year was extra special being able to do it 3 different times. And obviously, with the game being Sunday night, it's now almost 11 o'clock on Saturday of Super Wildcard Weekend. Enjoy the games today, and I'll see you tomorrow night as we get to watch the game together, man.
I'm looking forward to that. No hard feelings either way. It's just going to be a really fun game, and thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Alrighty, man. So I guess until next season, we'll have you back on. Maybe we'll have you on sometime around the draft, just because I'm sure there's always something interesting to talk about. Maybe we can talk about who each team ends up taking, and kind of how the 2021 season is kind of shaping up to look ahead to the 2021 season is kind of shaping up to be. But anyways, until next time, John, thank you so much, and have a great day. And like I said, I'll see you tomorrow, man. Take care.
Sounds good, John. Thank you so much.